So because X-Men Days of Future Past comes out in the next couple of days and I won't be able to watch it until like a week after it comes out, I figured I'll fill up the X-Men void by reviewing everything else. X-Men is directed by Bryan Singer, written by Solid Snake himself, David Hayter, and of course is based on the original comics by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. And this movie stars Hugh Jackman, Anna Paquin, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen. And in X-Men, two mutants, Logan, also known as Wolverine, and Marie, also known as Rogue, are pretty much found and taken in by Professor Xavier and his X-Men. Like, he runs a school for mutant children because the rest of the world, the general population, is just beginning to discover the existence of mutants and they are frankly very scared by them. However, Professor X and the rest of the X-Men still hold on to hope that one day humans and mutants will be able to coexist. However, on the other side of that coin is Magneto and his Brotherhood of Mutants, who believe that they are the superior race, and humans pretty much have to be punished because, they shun mutants and all that. So these two sides, the X-Men and the Brotherhood, will butt heads and mutant mayhem will ensue. Now, X-Men is Marvel's longest running film franchise, definitely. This came out in like the year 2000. I think it's important to remember that this was like considered the first good Marvel movie out there. I mean, Blade came out before it, but I'd consider that like the first successful Marvel movie, but this was like the first good one. And in this era, lots of people were kind of, hesitant about superhero movies ever since, Batman and Robin, Batman Forever, stuff like that. And so, the success and the quality of X-Men here really kind of reignited interest in superhero movies. X-Men isn't like a great movie in my opinion, like it definitely has its problems. However, for me, it's still fun and entertaining to watch. First of all, this movie came out like 14 years ago, and when you watch it today, it's true that some of the visual effects really have dated, but it's not like a problem. There's some movies that have visual effects that aren't necessarily the main focus of the movie, so it's not that big of a problem. And here, it's not a big problem. Other than those few special effects that don't look quite as good anymore, everything else in this movie does look great though. I like what they did with the costumes of the X-Men. Like, I don't read the comics, but I'm familiar with what, their costumes look like. And yeah, you really can't have Wolverine running around in yellow spandex. You can't have Cyclops wearing that skin tight suit. Like, instead, they swap all that spandex and stuff for leather. And I don't know, it just fits very well. At this point, leather's very overused. It's very cliched, it's like gritty and all. But it worked for this one. Also, gotta give kudos to the makeup department here because, you have characters like Toad and Mystique here who aren't necessarily completely human looking, and I guess the makeup really does a good job in kind of making them look believable, especially Mystique, who took like 9 hours to put makeup on, like every single day, as I heard. Another interesting thing to note about this first X-Men movie is that nowadays superhero movies tend to be like almost always 2 hours long or even longer. And so it's interesting to note that this first X-Men movie was at a very, very lean, like 1 hour 45 minutes. And I actually like this. Like, I have no problem with this. Like, the short running time and the very, very fast pace of this movie really kind of allows them to sidestep the complexities that come with X-Men. Like the very premise of X-Men is so loaded with, concepts about prejudice and, do I love my enemy? Do I hate my enemy? Stuff like that. And the fact that they just kind of decide to fast track it and, focus the story into kind of like a simpler action movie, even if they did that, it does kind of allow them to not take a fall where they might take a fall and just just focus on something simpler. And speaking of focus, I really really like how the X-Men movies really focus on Logan more. He is arguably the main character of the X-Men movies, and I know a lot of fans of the comics might disagree with that. But for me, I kind of try to separate the two. Like, I like having Wolverine as the main character because if this were back in the year 2000 and I heard they were coming out with an X-Men movie, I would have, imagined that they would have made the main character someone like Cyclops. Or I could have even imagined them picking Rogue, because she's the young, kind of naive one, and, you really do get to see this world unfold through her eyes. But using Wolverine's point of view really makes it interesting because you really don't know where he stands for quite a while, but he really just makes for such an interesting protagonist, in my opinion. And it's thanks to all this focus and, sharp editing choices that this movie never really does feel cluttered. And that's also something the script gets right. It, again, is a very focused script, and aside from a few cringe-worthy lines, it, overall is very good dialogue. Especially for Wolverine and Magneto, they definitely get the best parts here. Now, again, the very premise of X-Men is very, very loaded with these big themes, and while they don't really tackle the themes here, I don't mind again. And really just having these themes in the background and knowing that, they imply so much and they're so loaded and weighty, for me, that's enough for this movie. And in terms of acting, I think a lot of people forget that this was like Hugh Jackman's first big role. Like he was pretty much an unknown actor when they cast him as Wolverine, and he's like the only person who can play Wolverine now. Like he just plays it so well. He's been playing him for almost 15 years, and he really does capture that Wolverine character really well. He's not a straight up vigilante guy, but at the same time he doesn't become soft or anything. He strikes that balance really well, and you can tell that he has this kind of gray morality about him. Patrick Stewart is in this movie, and of course he's always going to be good. And who else is there who can play Professor X? And again, his best scenes are always the scenes he shares with Ian McKellen as Magneto. And Ian McKellen in this movie might be my favorite performance in this movie because I don't know, it's just that he really brings that sense of what drives his character. He's one of those superhero villains who doesn't feel like they're just doing things to blow things up. Like he's coming from a place of really, really deep-seated hatred and revenge. And through all of this, through everything I've talked about, Bryan Singer really handles everything really well. And I'm not expecting every movie based on like a superhero theme to be as balanced character-wise, like let's say the Avengers. Here, it's definitely not like that, but I think he does handle it well enough so that again, it doesn't feel cluttered. You can argue that a lot of the time he's just kind of going through the motions, just trying to deliver a good first movie so you can build the franchise from that. But Bryan Singer really does execute certain scenes, certain sequences here really, really excellently. Like a lot of scenes with Magneto are just filled with tension sometimes, and I honestly kind of understand why he's considered like the father of the X-Men movies. It's like he is the right person to direct Days of Future Past because he's had the most experience working with these guys, and I think he understands them the most in terms of like the directors who have made X-Men movies. However, like I said a while ago, this movie is not without its problems. Definitely, one thing that really kind of bugged me. It's really small, but it always bugs me when I watch the first X-Men movie. Is that while the special effects, are dated, they don't really bother me that much. It's like the production design of certain locales that get to me. Like I don't know, the X Mansion never really felt like a school nor a mansion to me. Like I just kind of wish they had a better sense of place with the X Mansion. Like it is an important place in the X Men universe, and I kind of wish they kind of fleshed it out more. But my bigger problem is with Magneto's cave. The Brotherhood of Mutants cave. It's literally just a cave on an island somewhere in the ocean, and that might be faithful to the comics, but it just looks really cheap. And I refuse to believe that someone as sophisticated as Magneto is gonna hide in a cave with like no furnishings whatsoever. And since we're on the topic of Magneto and his Brotherhood of Mutants, while I love Magneto in this movie, his henchmen are just terribly weak. As in, really, like I find hard to believe again that his Brotherhood consists of like 4 people, and that's already including him. Mystique, Toad, and Sabretooth are really, really weak. They're like grunts that you fight in a video game. I am fine with the X-Men though. I think they're good enough. They have enough personality and function to distinguish themselves from each other, except for Storm, who is really, really bland in this movie. But anyway, the fact that the villains are so weak kind of make Magneto's big plan feel not as impactful as it should be. In fact, when the big plan is going on, like you kind of feel a bit more worried about the X-Men than all the people who are about to be killed. It's kind of weird. I don't know. It just really felt like Magneto's working with a bunch of amateurs, and so like his resulting plot just does not feel all that great. But in the end, I'd still say X Men is a pretty good movie. It's definitely like a safe way to start the franchise. It's not like they put all their chips in and decided to do something extravagant. No, it's like a really safe way to ensure that this franchise will live on for a long time. But it is still great to see that franchise still alive and kind of following the same formula as it did like 14 years ago. And that's actually something to be proud of. Anyway, that is my review of X-Men. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you loved it or you hated it, or whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.